Today we're going to be doing our lecture on conscientiousness, or grit is what it's more commonly referred to in sport. So it's conscientiousness, creativity, and decision making. We'll start off by me talking about what Simon, or who Simon chose for support. He chose Nicholas, but Nicholas isn't here, so I'll do it more for the sake of you guys than for the sake of Nick and Simon. He said support. I would like to give it to Nicholas. The reason I'll give it to Nicholas is because he fits it very perfectly and is very supportive on and off the court. He gives a good foundation to the team in games and in practice. And as coach said, he gives lots of compliments and learned du är så stor. Stor, not stor. So, Simon wanted to give it to Nicholas, and I think that that's a good decision. Yes. Okay, now we'll go into grit / conscientiousness. I'll just call it conscientiousness for the lecture because I like that word a little bit more than grit. They're a little bit different, and hopefully I can explain how they're different and also how they're similar. And so, conscientiousness, creativity, and decision making. So to start off, I would like you guys to first go and just talk about what you think about those words as individuals and how they relate to one another potentially, and then I'll go off on my rant, and then hopefully we can talk about it a little bit after as well. Rasmus.
I think decision making and creativity kind of goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to you have to know when to be creative, so that ties in with the decision making. And in general, decision making is just decisions, knowing, if you're a hitter, knowing when to hit which ball and knowing which person is the worst defender, or yeah. And I think for you to be a creative player, you have to have a solid base, which means you have to be able to make good decisions without, and you cannot be creative if you're making many mistakes, then you just make more mistakes probably. So you need to make good decisions, make good points, and then be creative on top of that. And creativity is just being creative, doing random stuff. Like Mbappé, for example, he's a creative player.
That wraps up the lecture. Whole thing done really good. Perfect. Exactly what I was going to say. Uni, you got something?
Yeah. I think decision making is you're choosing to do something even if you don't know if it's going to have a good outcome or a bad outcome. So you just if you have to hit a ball and you can't see kind of block, or it's out of system ball, and you just choose it maybe a lob or smash it. You don't know if it's going to get blocked or it's going to get picked up, but you just do something just because you need to keep it in play.
Mm.
And that does end with grit. The way I understood it was how it affects your surroundings. So if you choose to, if you're 5 points up and you choose to smash the ball in the court because you want to make the other guys scared, so you can get up even higher, or if you're down 5, you choose to play more tactically and just get the ball in play and don't do anything risky and accidentally hit it out in the back wall.
Mm-hmm.
And creativity is just trying things that might work if you're in a stalemate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Anybody else? You guys got anything? Yeah, Toby?
I feel like to be able to play creatively,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a good foundation technically. So you have to be able to do the in-system stuff good enough to get to a point where you can be more creative. I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you guys have pretty much nailed it. Which makes my job a lot easier. Makes it kind of fun with it. I have a water bottle somewhere.
Ja, lige der. Du lagde den inde i det der...
Hey.
Tak, sir. This is behind my trophy. So first I'll go over them a little bit and define them, and then we can talk about them individually, how they relate to each other, and then how I believe they relate to decision making. And hopefully by the end I'll be able to tie it all together. So, what conscientiousness and creativity are, it's part of a 5-factor model on personality. So I really like to use this model. So there's, if you to take a basic psychology course. They'll normally call it OCEAN, which is openness to experience, which is creativity. So creativity, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, and neuroticism. Yes. So what happens is what the original researchers did was they took a bunch of questions, hundreds of questions, you can take thousands of questions, and you ask them to people, and people will tend to cluster together within groups and then in these groups, then you can determine whether, then that determines the 5 factors. So say you're agreeable, I'm a very agreeable person, and that means that I'm not very prone to conflict. I would rather just level out conflict than actually have a conflict with someone. So that's something that I struggle with constantly, because I know that it's good to have conflict with people. I know that that makes relationships better going into the future, but they hurt my soul. So I really have to push myself to have conflict with people. And so another part of that would maybe be forgiving people. I'm really quick to forgive, and that's a part of being agreeable. And conscientiousness is dutifulness, hardworking, orderly. So the people that get straight A's in school, besides being super smart, they're probably very conscientious. At least the people that learn how to learn. And conscientiousness is a relatively stable trait, but it improves as time goes on. I was unfortunate enough to not be super conscientious when I was young, and so I've had to learn that. But as you get older, it becomes, you get better and better at being conscientious. And then, again, it's funny, conscientiousness is the second best predictor of lifelong success, and the number 1 predictor is IQ. So I think that's pretty interesting. Creativity is your ability to go outside of the lines a little bit, outside of borders, outside of boundaries, pushing the envelope a little bit. Neuroticism is negative emotion. So that's, if something bad happens to you, how bad do you feel, and how long does that stick around for? If you're hyper-neurotic, then the small things will feel like big things, and if you're not very neurotic at all, then the big things will feel, okay. And then there's extroversion, which is kind of your ability to be energetic and energized around people and being able to socialize quite easily. So those are the 5. And creativity and conscientiousness have a really interesting relationship because they are the precursor to political affiliation. So people that are liberals tend to be more creative, or people that, I would say it's actually the opposite. People that are more creative tend to be liberals, or the blue side of the aisle. I don't know what you guys have here in Denmark. You guys have liberals and conservatives?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty much the same. And then conscientiousness, or more specifically orderliness, that is related to conservatives. I think that's just the coolest thing in the world. I know that the world is a little bit divided right now in, like, if someone's conservative, then they're a right-wing fascist, and if they're a liberal, then they're a communist. But I think that the relationship, that's what happens when the relationship between those two things break down significantly. I think that a functioning society actually has a good mixture of those two things. We need conservatives and we need liberals. The reason that I think that is because we need the conscientiousness, we need that grit, grit is more of a sports term, and that is the ability to stick to something diligently over time and trust in the process. So again, it's a stable term. So that's why I think they're so closely related, but I like to use conscientiousness because that's what I grew up learning. So the way that they're related is we need that conservative mindset because things in the past have generally worked out. I believe that we live in one of the most abundant and prosperous times of human history, at least modern human history. I would not gamble my life to live in any other time of history within the past 10,000, 13,000 years. This is a pretty good deal where we're at right now. And that means that the way that we've gotten here is that things have went well, and we have done the right things, and we have made the right decisions, and that's how we've gotten here. And then we also need the creativity to push the envelope. So we need people that are okay with the past and how things have gone in the past, and we also need people to push the envelope and bring in fresh water. So the analogy that I would like to use is the conservative type is a lake, and we want to maintain the lake. But if we maintain the lake too much and we don't let any fresh water in, if we don't let lakes in, if we don't let streams in, then the water is going to stagnate, everything's going to stop flowing in, and then over time it becomes a marsh and a bog because the water can't move around. And then if everything is the liberal ideology or too creative, then we bring in too much all at once and we have a flood and we have no idea what's going on. The way that I think about that with regards to this team is we have a culture on our team that we've developed, and primarily we stick to that culture. And then every now and then we bring new stuff in. We either stop doing things or we introduce new things, and then that brings, hopefully, some semblance of success. I joked about it yesterday with Louds because he asked if we were going to do visualization before the match, and I said, no, we're not going to. Or he said, do you want to talk? Do you want to talk before the match? No, we're not going to talk before the match. He asked why, and I said, well, ever since we stopped doing visualization and talking before the match, we started winning. And I really like to win, and as much as I like to talk, I like to win more. So, if we're winning and we're not talking, then we're going to continue to not talk. And I joked that that was the natural evolution of winning, was whatever coincidental thing that I see working, I will continue to do that thing. And so that's the idea of creativity, is we have a set model, and I'm slowly trying to introduce things. You guys are introducing your own things, and then through that we hope to find some kind of equilibrium where we're successful as a unit. That's what I think of optimal culture. Do you guys know the symbol, the Tai Chi 2? You guys, the yin and yang. Yin and yang are part of the Tai Chi 2. There are 5 parts in the Tai Chi 2, and yin and yang are the 2 that people are most familiar with. And I think that that's a very accurate display. That's a very accurate symbolic interpretation of the conservative liberal cultural phenomena. You need yin, which is I want to say yin is the white one, but I always forget. You need the yin and you need the yang, and you need a little bit of each within each other. And that's the only way that you can be successful, is if you have that, they're constantly flowing around each other, they're constantly circling each other. There is one within the other, because if you're too conscientious, then nothing new will ever happen. And if you're too creative, you'll never be able to get anything done. And I think that's actually the funny thing with children as well. I work at a school, and people always talk about how creative kids are. The only way that you can actually manifest creativity is by being competent enough, and the only way you can be competent is by being conscientious. So that goes to what you said, was that you need to understand things well enough, you need to have a base level of skill before you can actually expand that with creativity. Which is very true. And it's the same with kids. A lot of people think that kids are creative. They're not really. Normally they're just bad at things. And people confuse that for creativity. But if you can learn how to do things repeatedly and actually get good at something, then you can learn to be creative. Or then you can manifest your creativity. There's a really famous cognitive psychologist named Jean Piaget, and he's the man that figured out the general steps of development or stages of development in children from adolescent to late teens, early adulthood. And something that he talked about was something called ludic play. And there's ludic play, and then there's kind of a goal-directed play. And goal-directed play is with the example of a kid walking. You see someone doing something, so say that we'll use the example of a kid walking. So the child sees his parents walking and decides, I would like to try that. And so it keeps trying that, and it flails at that, and flailing is when you're just not good at something, and so you keep on trying. It's the same as how kids learn how to speak. When they first start learning how to speak, they mumble all of the different sounds that a human being can make with their mouth. And then over time, based on the noises around them that they hear, then that narrows and narrows and narrows, narrows, narrows until they only have the noises that that their culture can make or their language can make. That's why I'm so bad at Danish. That's why you guys are subpar at English. That's probably why I'll never learn an Arabic language, because they're just different. They're different noises, and as you grow older, your mouth hardens, and you won't be able to make the sounds that are required to speak those languages. You actually won't be able to hear them either, which is really funny. There was an old professor that I had that he taught a sensation of perception course where we talked about like noise and how people perceive noise, and they brought in a Japanese class, and the Japanese class came in, and he was doing a lecture on how violence impacts, or how video games influence violence in youth populations, and he used the word killing a lot because that's just part of the lecture. And then he asked the Japanese students if he could actually photocopy their notes and just take a look at their notes, and he noticed that one kid kept on writing Kiring, Kirring, because he couldn't hear the L because they don't have that phoneme in Japan.
Is that why Asian people are so bad at English? Just to generalize.
Yeah, it's the reason that you can have a pretty good general Asian what's that called? Not interpretation. Oh Jesus. Impersonation. You can have a pretty good general Asian impersonation if you switch your L's for R's. Yeah, mull that over for a little bit. So anyway, what happens with the ludic play thing is that over time we fumble with things. We're trying to get good at something and we keep missing, but we're fumbling and we're flailing and we're trying to get there because we have a goal-directed outcome. And we keep on trying to get there and we keep on failing and flailing. But then one day we get there. And that's the goal-directed play, is getting there. And then once we've gotten there, then you actually get bored, which is really funny, because everyone wants to try to avoid being bored, but being bored is the most amazing thing, because once you get bored, it means that you're competent enough at something that you need something more. You need to push the boundaries. So I've talked a lot about learning as a tree. Do you guys remember that? Maybe that's been more in isolated groups or in practice where some people haven't been there. But I see learning generally as a tree, and what a tree does is it wants to grow its roots as far out as possible and as deeply as possible so that it can anchor itself to the ground in case there's a Danish windstorm and it knocks over half the trees. So what it wants to do is push those roots out, and that's actually a part of what the canopy does. The canopy of the tree is meant to push the rain to the outskirts of the root system so the roots are forced to reach further and dig deeper. I think that a similar thing happens with the ludic play is a part of that learning process. It's when you get so bored because you're so far under your own canopy that you need to get outside. And I'm sure that's happened to you guys. I'm sure that you guys can think of examples where you've been so bored at something, hopefully not this lecture, but you feel the need to get out and escape and try something new. Like when you're so good at passing free balls or you're so good at standing float surfs, then you just need to do something else. And that's how creativity is born. It's actually, okay, I think that that's why I hate phones so much. Not phones in general, but the fact that people use their phones to avoid uncomfortable situations and boredom is because it's in those moments of boredom where you jump to Instagram or TikTok that you could be getting better at something that's outside of your zone of proximal development. There's this really funny South Park episode where, do you guys watch South Park?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now I'm not going to do the Chappelle thing where nobody gets it. I'll keep going with this one. Okay, so South Park is a crude animated show, and really it just has its finger on the cultural pulse, particularly of America. So if you're ever going to America, maybe for a few years, you want to live there, go watch all of South Park several times, and you'll probably understand the past 25 years. So they have an episode where one of the kids in the town smokes weed, and so then the parents start to freak out a little bit, and they end up hiring a firm that stages people as their kids from the future So the character is Stan. Stan's parents hire someone to pretend that they're Stan from the future, but he acts as a total bum. Like a high school dropout that smokes a lot of drugs and drinks a lot, and the guy's just a total loser. And at the end of the episode, it ends up going horribly, of course, as you would expect. And at the end of the episode, Stan and his dad are talking, and Stan's like, "Why wouldn't you just tell me not to smoke or do drugs or drink or any of those things?" "Well, Stan, the reason that we don't want you smoking pot is because if you smoke pot, it's not bad, it's not going to kill you, it's not going to destroy your life, it's not going to make you addicted to heroin. But what it's going to do is make it so that you're okay with being bored. And in that time when you're bored, you could be doing something like learning a new skill, learning how to play guitar, learning a new language, starting a business, doing something that helps you, helps your friends, helps society." And that's the thing, is you don't want to be okay with being bored. And so I feel like films do that, unfortunately. They're also amazing. I understand how amazing films are. But, yes. So, I think that the relationship between creativity and conscientiousness is decision-making. I think that it's the friction between those two things that's decision-making. When you're so competent at something that you need to move outside a little bit, but it's being able to make choices. When are the choices that it's appropriate for me to go outside of my wheelhouse? When is it appropriate for me to go for it? Like we've been talking about serving, when to go for it, when not to go for it. Is it appropriate to go after an ace when it's 2020 and you're not the ace guy? I would say no, but that's decision making. There's a German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche, and he wrote a book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And in one of the first passages of the book, he talks about human beings being on a tightrope over a cavern, and on either side of that rope is the ape, the animal, human, and what he calls the Superman. And the Superman is kind of the ideal interpretation of the self. So, if you had your perfect self sitting in front of you, and your worst self sitting behind you, you're on a tightrope. And I think that tightrope is decision making. How we stay on that tightrope is decision making. The people that are most successful over time, sorry, public speaking is not my forte, so if my concentration's broken, I'm just done. Yes, the point that I want to make is there's a relationship between conscientiousness and creativity, and I believe that where that bridges, where that friction lays, is in decision making. If you can make good decisions over time, you will have a very successful life. You will have an optimal life. I think that the reason that I'm okay with the person that I am is because I think that I've made pretty okay decisions in my life. A lot of that has been because other people have told me what decisions to make, which is really nice. Just as we've talked about before, the best thing that you can do is go and find out what other people have done. If you want to be successful in life, go read books about people that have been successful in the domain that you wish to be successful in, and they will tell you the right decisions to make. Fortunately, I have been surrounded by a bunch of people far smarter than I am, and they have encouraged me to make the decisions that I have ended up making. So, what I want for all of us, what I want for you guys especially, is that you guys can learn how to make good decisions. And it is a learning process. It is that learning process of figuring out how to avoid the swamp of conscientiousness and the flood of creativity. How can we bring those together to create a Garden of Eden? And what I've tried to do over the past couple of weeks, is to give you guys a roadmap with the future authoring, with the goal setting sessions, so that you guys can be better informed with your own decision making. So that you guys can see, okay, this is what I want, this is how I can get there, these are the decisions that I can make, these are the opportunities available to me. I would say decision making is probably one of the most important things to me. In terms of the team, in terms of me personally, in terms of life in general, I think that if you make good decisions over time, you will be in a good spot. You will not regret your life if you make good decisions. If you make the right decisions, even if you're not successful. I have made tons of decisions where I have not been successful. I've probably told this story a lot, but when I was in my first year of university, I really wanted to be an academic All-Canadian. That means you get a 3.5 GPA, which is probably around a 10 here. I really wanted that, but I didn't really want it because I didn't actually act on it. I didn't make the decisions that would have allowed me to get that. And then in my final year of university, I decided, okay, I really want that. And I started to make the decisions that would get me there. I started to actually study and read books. It's a shocker that those things can get you good grades. I never would have thought. And in the end, I didn't do well in my first half, but I was taking 6 courses per semester, plus volleyball, plus volunteering, really trying to just load up my entire life so I could take on as much responsibility as I could. And that in itself was a good decision, in my opinion. On top of that, I didn't do well in my first half, so my second half I had to do really well. So I totally dedicated myself to the studies. I would go in, watch the lecture, not take notes, because I don't think you should take notes during the lecture. I think you should just be focused on the lecture and engaging, and then I would record the lectures, and then I would listen to them after the lecture and take notes and study. And in that I got a 4.0, which is probably like an 11, maybe 11.5, I don't know what it would be. And then because of my first half, I got a 3.49. So I missed my dream GPA academic All-Canadian by 0.01 of a grade. I am so content on that. I am so happy that I missed that, because I made a decision and I stuck to it, and I put everything that I could into it. Even though I didn't achieve my desired outcome, I made the right choices, I made the right goals, and I think that I'm better because of that. Even though I didn't get the accolade, I'm happy with the decisions that I made. I want that for you guys as well. It doesn't matter if we're successful or not. It matters as to whether or not we're making the right decisions. Because if we're making the right decisions, we will get better at the things that we're trying to get better at. That's what life is.